Hey, everybody. Welcome to Question Christianity. Tonight, we are doing Christian Q&A happy hour. So tonight, we are going to be taking questions. We've got some questions prepared for each other as well. So apologist to apologist questions. And then we're also taking listener questions. So
and there has been, to my knowledge, no cheating. I haven't shared my questions.
Right.
No one shared their questions with me.
We don't know each other's questions yet.
Okay.
yeah, so completely on the spot. So that could be good or bad. We will see how that goes. But as you know, I am Caleb Johnston, and next to me here tonight is the one and only
Kevin Smith.
And hanging out down here in the bottom.
Yep, Charles Grace, Reasonable Faith. Happy to be here.
Glad to have both you guys with me tonight. I look forward to what kind of conversation we're going to have. Hopefully it will be enjoyable for everybody, especially our listeners. So I'm going to go ahead and let people know that please feel free to drop questions in chat. We try and make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, whether it's a general question you would address to any Christian, whether it's a Christian to Christian kind of question, we're open to all that kind of stuff. So please feel free to drop things in chat. We would love to interact a little bit with people. So in the meantime, though,
we need some type of way to figure out like who's going first, like like.
Well, whoever takes the first question gets to pick the next victim. Person to have. That should be like, a perk, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Who's the oldest?
Oh.
The oldest go first?
Oh, thanks. Thanks. That's nice, Charles. Appreciate that. Thanks for calling me out there. Okay. Well, the oldest will ask the youngest, so it won't be you, Charles.
Nice. Perfect.
All right. Okay. I'll ask Caleb a question. Really, either of you could take this question, but I'm going to give it to Caleb. So the topic is Age of Earth Creationism. Nothing specific, but let's say from a Christian to Christian perspective, if you were talking to someone who's traditionally thought that the only way to be a creationist is if the Earth is just only several thousand years old. That's the only way to reconcile the biblical account. What would you say in brief to another Christian who wanted to know how you can hold to an older Earth view and reconcile that to the Genesis account? I know that's a massive question, but if you were just going to introduce that, how would you do it in brief to another Christian?
Yeah, so that's a fun one. I've had a number of these conversations, and I actually had one friendship that very much started around this question because we came at each other so hard on it as an issue that eventually it developed into this friendship just over coming at each other really hard over this issue. But to give some real brief background before I go into this, I would say that for the majority of my life, I probably kind of followed a young Earth view of things. And really most of the churches I grew up in were all kind of young Earth. And this became a fairly critical issue to me later in life in college, where, it really became very clear to me that, from a scientific perspective, the Earth is not as young as is suggested by young Earth creationists. And I went back to a comment my dad had always said in discussing this kind of thing. I was homeschooled. And so, my dad, in discussing this issue, we used a very conservative curriculum, but he made a deliberate effort to say, well, you know what? There's another side to this, and it really is not a critical issue for salvation. It certainly doesn't impact that. So he just said, I don't know if how old the Earth may be, or even if evolution was used as part of that process, but it doesn't impact other things. And it was that I went back to as I began to kind of research which positions theologically held up, that kind of kept me through the conversation. So I think no matter who you're talking with, the first thing is you have to distinguish whether this is something that is a game changer. And I don't think the age of the Earth is a game changer for whether we can fellowship with somebody else.
Right. Yep.
Right.
It's not a heresy to believe in a young Earth or an old Earth.
Man. If we could just settle between the two schools on that
would make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
But then in looking at it, you really have to, when actually looking at this issue, you have to look at Genesis. What does the text say? What does it not say?
Mm-hmm.
And what is its intent?
Yes.
One of my professors in college, Dr. McDermott, he very much took this approach of looking at it from a literary perspective. What was this saying about the Israelite culture? What was it saying about the other cultures that were around them? So what was the purpose of this text when it was initially written? And, I think we have to start there and look at what was the purpose and what can we get out of it from looking at it in a historical perspective. And then once we go from there, I think it's also reasonable to consider what the science says. So what does science say about the origins of the universe, about the origins of humanity? Let's take a look at that. Let's see where these accounts work together, where they might not be meant to work together. I've certainly came away from a perspective that was very much geared towards this being a origin text from a scientific perspective, to being something that is what's the word I'm looking for? Less. Completely blanked on the word, but the narrative of science does not have to line up precisely with the book of Genesis, because it has an intent that goes far beyond just giving the origins for humanity. It's giving a theological statement.
Let me jump in on that.
Yeah.
And well, I can hear people scream, or some people scream and saying, "Oh, then your predominant way to interpret Genesis is science first, and it's a retreat in science, and so you're using science as really your larger covering, and then however you can fit Genesis under that." How would you respond to maybe that type of an attack or criticism?
Right, and maybe I wasn't very clear on this. I think that you have to look at the text historically. What's it trying to say? Is it trying to say these things scientifically? Is it making a statement about the scientific origins of the universe, or is it making a theological statement about God and about his plan for humanity? So I think you have that piece you have to look at. You have to look at what is the context and what is the meaning of the text. What are we supposed to draw from it today, and what is taking it too far? The word I was looking for earlier was concordist. So you have these perspectives that very much say science lines up with Genesis, and you have these on both the young and old Earth sides of things, that the text corresponds with how creation happened. I think I take much less of a concordist position now, because there are just spots where the text does not line up in a way that works. And I think that's on either the young Earth or the old Earth side. Personally, I lean old Earth, and I'm hesitant to embrace theistic evolution because I think there are some major holes there. As well. Do I think we can have theistic evolutionist brothers and sisters? Absolutely. But, I think there are problems with the evolutionary theory. There are some holes that come up when you look at that. And so in looking at Genesis, I try to make sure that I'm taking it as it was intended to be taken. And then the science is another matter. What does the science say? What lines up? Where are there holes? And I think those are two things that aren't necessarily meant to mesh together perfectly. So we can look at science, we can see what science says, and we can look at the text and see what the text says and what it's meant to say. And it doesn't mean those things have to line up perfectly, because I don't think that Genesis was intended to line up perfectly with our scientific understanding. And if the scientific understanding changes a year from now or 50 years from now, Genesis probably still has the exact same purpose that it did back then, as it does now, as it did when people thought the Earth was flat, as it did, when whatever advancements we see in terms of Big Bang cosmology come out. Genesis still probably had the exact same intent to the readers. Could there be some other information there that hints at, the text giving us more scientifically? Sure, maybe, but I don't think it has to.
All right.
Does that kind of answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, it does. And for our listeners, I think I know you would say, but if you could pick one resource, one place to go to start on that, where would it be?
Ooh.
Maybe website. That's tough to narrow down to one starting place. But
Reasons to Believe played a big role for me in looking at this issue, because they come at it from an old Earth perspective. Again, it is very concordist in terms of they see an old Earth perspective as lining up very precisely with the text.
Wonderfully,
so I think
God honoring Scripture, inerrant Scripture, believing interpretation of Genesis, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. So that would probably be the one site that's been really helpful to me. To get that kind of other side of it, if you're convinced evolution is true, looking at the works of John Walton would be a really good place to start. If you're fully convinced of evolutionary theory, take a look at some of his work on Genesis, and you may see that it's not quite incompatible with looking at Genesis.
I'd like to clarify a few things. I know it's not my question, but just for the general audience. The question of old Earth and evolution are two totally separate things. I think, well, they're not totally separate. In order to believe the evolutionary side, you're probably going to buy the old Earth side, but it's not the other way around. And I think a lot of times people that, when they learn that someone is old Earth, automatically assume that they are also theistic evolution, or maybe just evolution. And those are not at all. I don't think I personally know any evolutionary Christian, at least in my inner circle I know of. But I know a lot of old Earth, but all of them are non-evolution. So.
Right, yeah, that's a good distinction to make. Although you would have to hold to an older cosmos in general to hold to evolution, at least traditional or Darwinian evolution. It doesn't follow that if you hold to an old cosmos that you hold to evolution, or that you're somehow giving evolutionists a lot of ground. I don't think the amount of time needed is the real problem with evolutionary theory, in my view.
Right. Yeah.
Much more significant philosophical and scientific problems with it than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not afraid that I'm giving them some great ground by granting an old Earth or not. And like Caleb said, I also agree it's secondary. It's important, but it's secondary in that, the way I like to put it, the first question is whether there was a creation, not when. And people are so eager to debate about when. Well, let's put energy into establishing what, that there was in fact a creation.
I really like what Caleb said, especially the point that if science is to change its opinion on the age of the Earth, I think whatever else might also be in there, the primary intent of Genesis is not the age of the Earth. That's certainly not the primary intent.
Yeah. All right, Caleb, I think ought to get to pose the next question.
All right. Well, you know what? I am going to go right back at you, Kevin.
Nice.
So,
I love being here, just being able to input, but not being responsible for the answer.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, you're coming up next. So, all right. So, Kevin, if Christianity were not an option, so if Christianity either didn't exist or were disproven in some sense, what would you be?
Oh. Now, when you say, are you saying just Christianity or theism altogether? We're
just taking Christianity off the table.
Oh.
Just found the bones of Jesus in the tomb, man.
Okay. All right. Wow. So we have every other option except Christianity. That's a really good question because I think all of us can be honest that we've considered questions, doubts, other worldviews, or the strengths and weaknesses of them, but I don't think any other theistic alternative has had much pull to me.
Come on, this is an easy one. I already know what you're going to say, and you don't even know yet. Well, maybe yet.
No, I would like you to tell me.
Yeah.
I'll elaborate, but
I'll tell you if you land where I think you're going to land.
Say it.
No, you first. It's your question.
Right. So I still think that the evidence for theism in general, from every angle, philosophical, existential, historical, scientific, transcendence, every possible angle supports theism in general. So if I can't choose Christianity, wow, that's a problem. It's going to probably reduce me to some sort of deism because I don't think there's any historical. Well, obviously that leaves Judaism. Christianity is the outgrowth of Judaism. That would be the closest thing. There's no historical grounds for claims of Islam or other theistic religions, in my view. So, wow, is that what you're going to say, Charles, that I reduced to Judaism?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
It just took me longer to figure out what I think than for you to figure out what I think. It's difficult for us, though.
There are logical concentric circles.
Yes, you're right.
I think one of the biggest missteps that people, and it can be so tragic sometimes, but they'll run across a Bible verse that for some reason or another really flummoxes them or they find problems with, and then they abandon everything, and then these people are atheists, and it's an illogical step. Okay,
right.
If Christianity is not true,
then nothing must be true.
Evidence for there being a God, the revelation in the Old Testament, tremendous prophecy in the Old Testament, tremendous. All the arguments that we have for the Old Testament still stand. We're just waiting for a Messiah now. It turns out.
Right. We Orthodox Jews.
Yeah. Yeah.
Messiah
So.
expecting Jews.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, yeah, and it is a weird phenomenon that you, as you say, that when people give up on Christianity for whatever reason, they just give up on, they throw it all away at once as if it's just one thing. And that really, gives atheism or naturalism sort of a free pass, as if it's kind of the background default truth that we all need to be able to disprove in order to hold our religion. When we really think about it, that's what's happening.
Well,
Not sure why people react that way, because it's
because we're emotional. That's we hate to say it, especially guys. It's no, I'm all logical. There's no emotion in me. Not true. We're all human beings. We're all emotional, and I think sometimes, especially when I mean, if you've grown up Christian, it's so emotional to you that when you leave it, it becomes like not just a logical throwing away. It becomes an emotional
loss. So the sense of loss is so strong that it can only relate to total disbelief, I guess.
Well, and to make so I'm with you. I think for me the logical back step would be Orthodox Judaism. But you still got rules. You still got a moral law. You gotta uphold. So there's still. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is when you throw everything away, you get this moral freedom. It's kind of this enticement. It's like, well, I grew up like this and I love this, but on the other side, if I got to throw this away, I can do anything,
So maybe it's a matter of why people throw it away.
If
it's because, and I think it happens in a lot of cases, moral exhaustion.
That's interesting.
Right? I can't. I just know there's no way I can live up to this. If that's the feeling, we've all felt that. Regardless of how theologically connected we are. It's like if that's really the reason for your giving up, then the only thing that would be relief would be a total dismissal of moral reality, not just divine reality.
What
as far as authority goes.
Yeah, I think if I ended up burned on the New Testament, because the evidence is extremely strong for the reliability of the New Testament. If I was burned on that, I think, in all honesty, despite that there's also very strong evidence for the Old Testament, but I think I would probably, if I'm honest with myself, I would probably step out to a deism in general, and I would have to reassess whether or not Judaism holds up, just because I would probably take a step further away before I could take a step back. Just because if I had to reject the claims of the New Testament, I would definitely begin questioning the claims of the Old on a deeper level.
Well, there's actually something to that. So the only reservation I'd have to go into Orthodox Judaism is, a lot of the prophecies that we speak about are prophecies about the Messiah. And so, and they seem to be timed, with history. And so if all those didn't come true, then maybe you do have some prophecy. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. That's a hard one. I guess I'll come to that. I'll come to that. I'm not sure when I have to. I don't think it's going to happen.
That's a very interesting question. And I think it invites us all, and maybe viewers, to consider what they're struggling with and why, our own motives, kind of examine yourself. If I were to fall away, I don't think it would be because of a lack of evidence. Probably it would be some other issues that I honestly, I think, it's that strong.
Yeah, it would be 100% emotional for me, because I've come very close to stepping away.
And it can happen no matter how much knowledge you have, how rationally grounded your faith is. We're more than that too. So yeah, so maybe so realistically, if I did walk away, it would
it kind of begs the question. It's like, what are you basing your faith on? And
right. That's what I was trying to get at earlier. That's why this is a great question.
grown up, and it was just like, as they grow up, it's like Christianity, you know, the parents have laid it on them. And that's a blessing, by the way. It's not a bad, that's a blessing. I didn't have that. So I came to faith late in my early, mid-adult life.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, I kind of had to make some steps. It's like, okay, I think there's a God. I think there was a historical Jesus person. I had a real problem believing that he was divine. I was like, come on, you know, and the whole thing with miracles, that was really hard for me. So if that was taken away, I think for me, it would be easier to make the logical step back because I walked that road. But for some people, if they've been raised in it, was kind of like, here's Christianity. It's
one package.
And if you reject any of it, then you have to throw everything away. Now, people are individuals, so I don't want to say every person is like this if you grew up in a certain situation, but I don't know, that may be a tendency. And so maybe we could say that if that was you and you did have the blessing of growing up in a Christian household, you should know there are a lot of logical pillars holding up this thing that we call Christian faith. It's not an it is an all or nothing thing in the end, but it's not standing in isolation on, you know, this delicate beam.
Yeah, which is to say, Christianity may have been presented to you prepackaged, but that package can bear inspection, deconstruction, and reconstruction.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Do it with faith. Like, you don't have to be questioning to do it. Like, do it in faith. Like, let me find out what's at the bottom of this. Hey,
get stronger.
You can ask any of us. We have dialogue with atheists. We've looked at the hard arguments, man. You are in safe hands to go and look at the historicity, the science. Yes, we're saying science, all this other stuff. You can, as Kevin said, deconstruct and reconstruct, and that will be a blessing, I think, to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like my time is coming.
All right, back to you, Kevin. So you get to hit somebody with the next question. I think I know who it'll be.
Yeah, my slightly younger friend. Okay, this one is, I don't think it would be very hard, actually. It's kind of tailored to your recent reading. I'm going to ask you a question about C.S. Lewis, and it might be hard to narrow down, but the Screw Tape Letters, talking about, a fictional account of how the demonic works, not in some sensationalist way, but in the very daily, ordinary way of working with our own evil motives that we have in our hearts, right? So, you've been reading the Screw Tape Letters for a while recently, studying it. What would you give us, our audience, as maybe one of the most, if not profound, maybe most interesting insights Lewis has given you recently about the human heart, about our motives, about our inner life and temptation, that sort of thing that you've been thinking about recently from Lewis?
Yeah, so that is an easy one, because I every chapter it's really quite incredible, because the Screw Tape Letters is not an inspired work, like divinely inspired. I think C.S. Lewis, man, he just really had his pulse on the nature of society, the nature of man, and maybe even the nature of God. And I think he put all those things together. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, before I answer your question, is I read that C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters were a fairly big hit. And so he was asked to do a sequel. And he said, no way, I'm not doing it. He said, I had to go and put my mind in such a dark place to write that book. I never wanted to do it. It was a miserable experience for him to write. And he did write a Toast to Wormwood, I think, as is kind of the closest he could come to writing a sequel. But so that's just kind of the background. Like, he had to kind of take the wonderful things that he understood about God and the nature of man, and really kind of reverse those. So, but the book was written, I think, in 1945 or something really close. It's like gosh, what is that, like 67? It's a lot. 65 years? Is the math right on that? 50, 75 years?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of a long time. And man, he has got his finger right on the button. And so recently we just read chapter 25, and I think you could probably find, well, Caleb turned me on to this, but you can watch each chapter on YouTube, and it's been very well illustrated. So if you just look for Screwtape Letters, you could probably find chapter 25. But I think you're doing a disservice if you watch just a video. That chapter is really deep, and you really need to it's hard to really grasp what he's saying because he's really compacting it. But chapter 25, I mean, I had to sit down, I had to read some of the paragraphs over and over again, and frankly, I had to look up some words that I really wasn't familiar with exactly what they meant. But one of the things he's talking about 25 is he's just got his this current U.S. culture nailed. And one of the things that's happening in 25 is okay, so for those who don't understand, the Screwtape Letters is a reverse perspective. So it's one demon writing and giving advice to another demon on how to basically corrupt his patient, this person that the demon is kind of in charge of corrupting. So everything's reversed. So even when you read it, if you just pick up 25 and you read it, and it says, if you're reading the text and it talks about our Father, that's Satan, and the enemy would be God. And so you kind of reverse everything in your brain to begin with. So it's additionally hard. But one of the things he said is, one demon talking to another, is one of the things that we really need to try to do in our culture is get on this bandwagon of calling out emergencies. What is it? Hold on. What's the term he used? I'm going to read this. Look, I got it bookmarked here. Fashion. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about fashions. This is crazy. So fashions, if you think about what a fashion is almost by its very definition something that isn't grounded morally. It's something that kind of comes and goes. It's just a fashion. The color of your shoes or bell bottoms. It's like there's nothing really grounding in it. It happens to be hip, and it can come and go. So it's fashionable, right? So he says what we try to do is steer the fashion of the culture, as demons are steering the fashion of the culture, to make popular things that seem to be moral emergencies, but to do that in areas where there's not really a moral emergency. And so, like he says, just to kind of give an example, he says the game is to have them all running about with fire extinguishers whenever there's a flood, right? Yeah, I mean, it's not bad to have a fire extinguisher, right? So it's not necessarily that the thing is wrong. It's that you only want people running around with a fire extinguisher when there's no fire. It's like there's flood, or all crowding to that side of the boat, which is already nearly gunwale under. So it's like, you're taking these moral issues and you make them into fashion. So they're not really grounded in the root of what's actually wrong. So it's right. And so one of the things that as our study went through, we just started writing some of these words down. And so see if any of these words sound familiar. Justice, tolerance, safety, inclusion, non-appropriation, diversity. Every one of those things is a good thing in its place. But the fashion right now is to make diversity a huge issue when diversity is not really the issue, right? Or to make justice the issue, like social justice, when justice is not really the issue. And then you take this fashion and you turn on this moral thing, and you get the whole culture. And what that does is you get the whole culture moving one way in a fashionable moral sense, and they're focused on the thing that's not really an issue, which means that everything else that really is an issue, everyone's ignoring because the fashion is to look the other way. So I don't know if you think that's happening right now in our culture, but
I'd say so.
So I guess that's the answer to my question. Chapter 25. I mean, that's just that really was just one paragraph, kind of in the middle towards the end. For those of you who've never seen it, interesting book.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, just I gotta chime in
Yeah,
because
please.
I love that
By
book
all
so
means.
much, and I know this is the line quoted so much from it, but Lewis makes this point that the most dangerous thing we can do is to either give evil, um,
Mhm.
absolutely zero attention,
Mhm.
or to give it too much attention. And either way of veering off on those paths can be very dangerous. So I
Mhm.
think that's the quote that has always stuck with me, and
Right.
that's what I think his whole book tries to do is not only pinpoint on these cultural
Mhm.
issues, but also give people a healthy respect for evil forces that are at work,
Yeah.
as well as the good.
I mean, I read that chapter and other chapters like it. And one of the things I walk away is, I mean, as human beings, I do believe that we are fallen and corrupt, and we can certainly and do create our own evil. But this general movement of the entire culture in these certain evil directions speaks very loudly to like this underwriting evil direction. So, uh, yeah, interesting. Good question. Good.
Yeah.
You
Very
ready for yours, Kevin?
okay.
All right. So this is going to seem a little geeky, but I've actually been wondering this for a while, and it's on the philosophical side. So as a philosophy professor, I don't know if everyone knows that,
Oh well, I have to put my glasses on then. Okay.
can you look over them while you're
Let me put them way down on my nose.
yeah.
How's that?
Let me set it up like this. Um, if I have a syllogism, so I have an argument that's in syllogistic form, maybe something like the moral argument. If objective moral values and duties cannot exist without God, that'd be one. And two, objective moral values and duties do exist. So three, therefore God exists. That's just like a
Hmm.
syllogism, right? But here's my question: if I don't understand how like philosophically logical that's supposed to work. I mean, each one of the syllogisms to me, if I look at a syllogism, I I am going to personally, subjectively kind of evaluate how much weight that carries for me. Like, so in other words, I'm not going to just probably just buy in like one, oh, that's 100% true. I can't argue with that. Maybe on some I can't, but I may be somewhere in the middle. Where it's like that seems more probable than not, right?
Are you talking about the whole syllogism
No,
or
no,
just the conclusion or
each line, like the
okay,
first.
each proposition, right? Each
Yeah.
premise,
So if
right?
I take the first premise and I evaluate the premise, and I personally feel like that premise is probably more true than it isn't. Okay, premise one, yeah, I think that's more true than it's not.
Mhm.
And then the same thing. So premise two, that also seems more probably true than not. And then and if the argument is a logical argument, then I'm forced to concede the conclusion, as long as the argument's a logically valid argument. So far, so
Right.
good.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
but my take on this is I think somewhere I'm confused with the idea of multiplied probabilities. So if multiplied probabilities being if I have like a 51% chance of driving to work and missing every red light, right? Like there's a 51% I can do that. And then on
Hmm.
the way home, there's another like 51% chance that I can do the same. The
Hmm.
chance of both happening is actually like around 25%, right? Because of
Okay.
multiple probabilities. So I'm wondering, how does that work with syllogisms? Because it seems kind of weird. Because if like to give a number, if I'm like 51% sure that the first premise is true, and 51% sure that the second premise is true,
Mhm.
does that mean like the whole syllogism is only like 25% logically true?
Right. I don't think it works like that. I think what's happening in your example, which is a great question, um, is we're kind of shifting back and forth between inductive and deductive
Hmm.
reasoning at this point. So let me present it a different way Not that, I mean, what you presented is a real experience for us, but let me just present it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got two premises that necessarily lead to a certain conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So that if both premises were true, then the conclusion would be 100% certain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the framework of a deductive argument, a syllogism.
Mm-hmm.
If your first line and your second line are both true and properly related,
Mm-hmm.
that means that the conclusion is 100% certain. So, however, realistically, as you said, okay, we're evaluating whether or how much we believe those premises, because in fact you could have a valid deduction from two premises that are completely false. The deduction would still be certain in the technical sense that if those statements were true, so would the conclusion be true. So here's the thing, there's a regress. It's not an infinite regress, but it could be pretty close depending on the issue. And that is, each of your premises, your first two lines, are themselves conclusions of previous arguments.
That's interesting.
Either deductive syllogisms or they're the conclusions of probability arguments, inductive reasoning, which have invested those lines with mere probable truth. That's where the complication actually comes in technically. So line one may be a probable truth, and maybe everyone agrees on it, even though we can't prove it. But it's highly probable, so you're not going to get a lot of argument with that one. But here comes the minor premise, the second premise, controversial proposition there. If it were true, then so would the third line be 100%. But the problem is each line there leading up is itself a product, the result of some previous set of premises. Either two leading to the certain deduction, or a whole list of observations leading to an inductive probability conclusion. So you have to trace your argument back like a family tree a few steps if you want to answer the question that you're asking for any given syllogism. How did we get these two premises? What's their basis? It's not an infinite regress, because you're going to come to some certainties or givens pretty quick, or highly probable things pretty quick. But how they all relate, that's the whole problem of logical argument.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. So the idea that, the premise is either true or it's false. So
it is right now. So not to confuse with your psychological confidence in it. You may like, okay, that's probably true. But that's your problem, and a real problem. But in fact, the claim is either true or false. And we need to take another step back and look at the evidence for how we got to that premise.
So it's
first two premises could be coming from different directions, completely different lines of arguments. Those are not the same proposition. One may be stronger or better evidence than the other. That's how it always breaks.
So it's like this, they're Boolean gates. So it's like, okay, subjectively, I may feel somewhat confident about premise one, but before I leave that, I have to decide whether or not it's true or false. And then even if I'm not 100% confident, I have to take the argument and say, okay, well, it's either true or false. So if it's more true, then I'm going to have to assume that it's true before I even go to the next premise.
Literally for the sake of the argument.
Yeah.
Literally for the sake of evaluating an argument.
Right.
Which is different than evaluating yourself or people, right? I mean, it's people that are doing the argument, but logic is real and independent on its own.
What else is interesting about that is, now that you've kind of spelled it out, is I think my problem with the stoplights is that my 25% probability is they're interrelated. Like I have to do one, and then I also have to do the other. Like they're, both kind of have to be true in a row. And these are more, they're separated. It's like, this one's either true or false, or this one's either true or false. And even if I'm 50% on this one, it has no bearing on whether or not the next one is true or false. They're both either true or false. Okay. I don't know if I'm restating, but actually it helps me. I think I'm gonna have to process it some more.
I'll just say one more thing. The stoplight thing, if you were making an argument out of that, it's going to be a probability argument, however many premises you used. You're probably, realistically, you're stacking up something like this. Hey, I just got all the stoplights on my way to work. Oh, now I'm on the way home. What's the chance of it happening again? Oh, a third time. So then your conclusion would be the next time I take this route, what's the likelihood of me getting all the lights? That's an inductive probability argument. It's not even a deductive. I mean, you might be able to make some sort of syllogism out of it.
Well, yeah, it would probably be something like, if I didn't stop at any stoplights on the way to work, and
yeah, you could put it back together that way.
I didn't stop at all either way.
Yeah, you could do that, but then I think you'd solve the problem that you had originally.
All right, that's it for my geek question.
Okay, good.
You're out of questions, right, Kevin?
Yeah, I just had those.
All right. Well, I'll hit Charles with my last one here. So I thought about giving you something really brutal, but instead, I'm gonna let you tell the listeners if they had to choose two resources besides the Bible in terms of study of apologetics, of the Christian faith, of worldviews, the whole gambit of things, if you had to only give somebody two resources, what would those be?
That's interesting. Okay, first a shout out, because someone better than me just kind of gave an answer like this. So one of the more recent podcasts on, what's Kokel's podcast?
Stand to Reason.
Stand to Reason.
He just covered this, and it was actually good. He did 7, but I thought his answers were really well put together, and he had good reasons for giving them. One, and so I'm gonna steal from him a little bit. I think I Don't Have Enough Reasons to Be an Atheist is an excellent book, because it's very broad. It talks about, it builds from the ground up, from like, does truth even exist, and how can we know it, and kind of builds from there all the way into Christianity. So and it's a fun read too, and it's well written. It's got some very solid arguments. I still, in my mind, when I'm faced with some atheist criticisms, there's just so much that book covers. It would be hard to leave it off my list. The other one, and this was a great insight by Kokel, is, I think, so you said we're going to have the Bible, like that's a given. We're not going to have that. It's an addition to that. One of what Greg said on his podcast was, I think it's helpful to have something that gives you the big picture on theology, because we can, especially for a new believer, you can kind of get buried. If you're trying to read from front to back, Genesis through Revelation, you kind of get lost in Leviticus or something like that, and maybe by the time you're there, by the time you get to like 2 Timothy, you've kind of forgotten some of the historical context and stuff like that. So having a good worldview, big picture, is, I think, very helpful. So you probably want something not necessarily apologetics driven, but like kind of theological, like some type of, I hate to use the word systematic theology, but something that kind of gives you a big picture view. So something like Mere Christianity is good, but also Greg Kokel's book, and what's his new one on worldview?
The Story of Reality.
That one. So that would be a great one. That is a great general view where you can kind of get the big picture, And then when you go back and you can read your Bible, you can say, oh, I can see how these things interrelate: prophecy, Messiah, Old Testament, New Testament. I think both would be very helpful. You shouldn't have theology without apologetics, and you shouldn't have apologetics certainly without apology, without theology. Apology. Both are very helpful. They're hand names.
That's a good point.
What would be on your list?
Well, it's going to depend on who I'm giving these to.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, if I'm giving these to a Christian, then one of the resources is going to be Greg Koukle's own book on tactics, just because it puts an application side to all this, and gives a way to actually utilize these things with people. So that'll be the only resource source I think I'll mention now. But for somebody completely outside of things, looking for something just to hear good Christian arguments, like you said, Mere Christianity is a great place to start for a really down to earth book. Yeah, so I'll mention those two.
You're kind of making me double think. Tactics versus you may have a point, because the beauty about tactics is you don't actually have to have, you can have very little or maybe even no specific apologetic knowledge and still do a wonderful job of listening well and defending your faith in a very coherent way.
We'll throw a really good study Bible on top of that, and somebody will be all set.
Yeah, ESV study Bibles, really good.
Yes, it is.
Kevin.
Yeah, I can't add anything. That's what I would say. Yeah.
All right, my turn. We got just enough time. So this is going to seem kind of weird, but literally last night I had a dream that in my dream I met two gentlemen, and as we dialogued, they told me that they were thinking about or very seriously considering becoming Jehovah's Witnesses. And so my question for you, Caleb, is kind of in that situation where maybe you're talking to someone who isn't yet a Jehovah's Witness, but they're kind of being wooed into that. They're very seriously considering. They seem kind of more on that side than anything else. And I know this is going to vary from person to person, but like what subject, what would be your kind of initial starting point as to talk to that person about that?
I think the key in talking to somebody who would be in that situation, the biggest key would be to look at the Watchtower organization itself. Because before they join any organization like that, they should at least want to know some of the history of the organization and how they came to the points they did now. So I think walking through them with some history of the Watchtower would probably be really helpful, because a lot of the core claims of Jehovah's Witnesses come down to the Watchtower. So they toss out every early Christian source because of the apostasy, which they claim occurred after 90 AD. And so anything after that, they're going to completely toss out up until the Watchtower and Charles Taze Russell comes around in just a few hundred years ago. So to look at the history of the organization would be something really important to walk through with somebody who's considering that. Another really important thing would be to make sure, in a gentle way, that they understand some of the tactics of cults. How cults operate. Steve Hassan has a great book on, I think it's just called Cult Mind Control or something along those lines. He was part of the Moonies for many years, and he wrote a book on this. And it's a really good book because it goes through the psychological aspects of cults and how they draw you in and the tactics they use to keep you in and that sort of thing. So those would be two of the biggest things I would touch on, unless this person is a very strong Christian and is considering becoming a Jehovah's Witness. If they were a stronger Christian, they know their Bible, I'd want to sit down and go through some scripture with them as well, especially comparing the New World Translation, which is the Jehovah's Witness translation, to our many other translations that are out there. So looking at, just the first book of Colossians with somebody and comparing the New World to an ESV or any of our other modern translations would be a good place to start.
Kevin,
So,
you're no stranger to that. You got something to add?
No, I agree totally. That's very good. Yeah.
I don't, not that I'm the specialist on this, but I don't think you need to end with the history of the Watchtower organization. The present disposition of the Watchtower organization would also be, because someone might go, oh, maybe they were a little misled in the beginning. It's like, well, what are you buying into now? Do you know you are commanded to owe fidelity to that organization? I think that's not something that's kind of like on the initial discussion topics when someone's becoming a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah, Watchtower organization.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you really have to be very careful with that, and I think you have to do so in a gentle manner that people understand. But there's a lot of dark history that Watchtower has swept under the rug, and really a lot of their core claims come down to what they've twisted on Christian history. So if the Watchtower organization is deceptive, if they are not looking for truth, then that's something anyone should consider before coming under an organization where every single resource you use from here on out has to be their resources.
Must be. So we got 3 minutes. So can you give us some examples? You said you would bring up some of the history. What would maybe be some of the examples?
Yeah, so I mean, you can start by pretty much looking up anything that they have as a current teaching now. So you look up their history of teaching on Christmas, and they say it's evil, it's a pagan holiday, but it was something that they celebrated as a group for many, many years. So you can look at their financial history, shows that they're involved with some corporations and companies that are actually involved in warfare. They produce munitions, planes, that sort of things for war, which is something the Jehovah's Witnesses are extremely against. But yet the own financial records of the Watchtower show that they're actually they're actually in stocks and bonds in these things. So they're making money off of it as an organization of something they're adamantly opposed to. And that's just a couple examples.
They claim to be against the occult, but the founder based many of his prophetic insights on pyramidology, the study of pyramids, and other things along those lines. So it's really interesting to see some of their earliest publications. I have this set from the late 1800s, The Divine Plan of the Ages, 7-volume set from Charles Taze Russell. And it actually has the Rosicrucian, the winged globe, Egyptian occult symbol on the front of each of these volumes. Some of the authorities they quote to deny the deity of Jesus that they quote in the Watchtower turned out to be those authorities themselves. One of them is a Spiritist, and actually have that book that they quote by the Spiritist. And because they can't read other literature, that's one of the few things you can actually show them. Like, look, will you read your own literature? Because most Jehovah's Witnesses living today have never seen anything from the 70s or before. The 70s was tumultuous for them because they predicted the end of the world multiple times, 71, 75, and then deny that they ever did that. So, but I actually have the magazines.
Yeah, man. I've seen them.
Yeah, you've seen them. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Now, some people might think, oh, well, maybe they were just a little wrong or took some missteps at the beginning, but they're on track now. But you have to remember, this is the very organization that is, as Caleb said, refuting everything that happened after 90 AD because they thought they were wrong, and then now they're wrong. See, they're claiming to be a prophet of God. They make that explicit statement that the Watchtower organization is the correct me if I'm wrong, but the current world's prophet.
Right, as an organization, collectively.
Right, as the organization. And so there's standards for that. And so if they're wrong, then they fail the biblical standard for being the prophet. And so just it's, I mean, every organization, my church has made mistakes, but my church isn't claiming to be the prophet of God. So there's kind of a logical thing there. Okay, what about if you were going to recommend a book on that? Maybe someone wants to follow up.
Probably the best all-around resource in dealing with all these cults, and really goes into the history on things. And there's a new updated version from just like a year ago. Kingdom of the Cults by Walter Martin is a excellent resource.
Writing that down. Okay, if I have that dream again tonight, man, those guys are be well prepared. All right.
Well, we got hit with a bunch of questions. Your wife decided to really hit us with some questions here, Kevin.
Yeah, wow.
They're good ones.
I asked Kevin Blue. Can we talk about that one?
Well, I had my monitor screen on, and apparently it was casting a blue light, so I unplugged that. So I'm not a Smurf anymore, apparently.
Oh, holy cow! There's a lot of questions here.
Yeah, we got bombarded right at the end. Good one.
So yeah, yes. we got hit with a bunch here. So I'll just flash some of these up here for a second so our viewers can see. 10-second answer, anybody?
Jealousy.
Yeah, he's human. Right. Yeah.
Jealousy.
All right.
Probably not.
I don't think it's. I think it says something. It basically equates to underwear or something.
Taking too long, Charles. All right, that one's on you, Charles.
No, I can't do it. I won't do it.
Judgment and mercy are equally part of the plan of redemption.
Ooh, wow. That's an important thing to say.
That's a good summary.
Micah.
It's the rapture before or after the revealing of the Antichrist and the tribulation.
We part for me. Kevin?
And, it really depends on your eschatological framework, right?
I think it depends on whether or not there's a rapture at all. Is one of the first questions you got to ask.
That would be the first.
That which relates to reality.
Corresponds to reality, yes.
Okay. Better said, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, reality.
All right. We've got one more that came in here by Dr. Strange. I threw one of his comments up a little bit ago about Jehovah's Witnesses and the New Testament use of Jehovah in there, which was a really good point. But here's a question. I don't know if we'll be able to get to this tonight. Kevin, maybe.
Oh, really?
I don't know if I have.
Great.
I'm pretty sure I haven't studied this before, so.
Hey, that's worthy of study. I don't think that Joseph is a theophoric name of Yahweh, but that we should look into that to understand whether it can be claimed as a contradiction or not. Okay.
Then we'd have to take like a whole nother session to get part B. If so, doesn't that
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so and
Great
Dr.
question.
Strange in our conversation here in chat, he's filled us in a little bit on his background. So
Wow.
hopefully hopefully he'll return. We love having these conversations with people with different views, and we love questions that challenge us like that. So we will definitely try and get back with you on that, Dr. Strange, and appreciate you being here tonight and participating in the discussion with us. So we will get back on that last question. Maybe we can answer that early on here when we do this again in 2 weeks.
I like it. This is fun.
This was good.
So we're doing the 28th then. Is that right? Is that the plan?
Is that the 28th? 2 weeks? Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? So the 28th. Yeah, I don't think I have anything going on. So.
Yeah, I could probably do that. Why not? We'll have a Christmas special, man.
There we go.
Like a Christmas-centric theme.
I like it. That'll be good. Let's plan on that for next time. And then I've spoken to a few people who may come on and join us for a discussion live as well. So we'll hopefully have a couple shows with that coming up. And as Dr. Strange put here at the end, be like him. Subscribe, give us a like.
The button isn't it somewhere over here?
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. So and hit the bell for notifications, so you'll be able to see when we go on and do this again.
The more you guys comment and subscribe, I mean, we want your comments and subscriptions, but it also helps us kind of rise up on the list and helps us get the word out, get our podcast out, makes us a little bit more higher on the search criteria. So it really does help. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles.
I hear your alarm, Charles.
Oh, yeah. Oh, can you hear that?
All right. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Have a great night. We'll see you in 2 weeks.